So hello everyone. Today I want to show you why it might be not the best idea to create a test for every class you have, especially if there are internal tests, and what can happen if you do so. So let's have a brief look at this little test here. So we have a service, we have a service A. Let's look at the service. It looks like that, very simple. One service A, and it has one collaborator, a B service, which is injected here in the constructor. And all we do is we have an invoke method, and when we invoke it, we basically invoke the B service, get hello world method. The B service looks like that. Also very simple. If the counter is 0, then we return hello world, else we return world hello. Now we wrote actually a test for each of these classes. So B service has a test to get hello world and one to get world hello. And at the same time we have a service test which basically does the same, calls the invoke method and asserts that we get hello world or that we get world hello. But additionally, the B service is not passed as an actual B service instance, but actually as a mock. So we use Mockito and we override this get hello world method and just return what is expected to do. And of course, this looks silly, but it's actually not far from what we see often also in production code in real life systems. So this is just one of the simplest version to actually do that. So why is it a problem if we create a mock here? Well, let's think about it briefly. If we have this invoke method and we see we just delegate, well, we could think that maybe we don't actually need the B service. So instead, we can actually inline that. So let's do this. We just inline it. And now, of course, we get this call counter. Let's say we put that directly on this A service. So now this is green again. Let's run our tests. And of course, the B service test will fail because we inlined this method. But we wouldn't need this B service necessarily anymore, so we could delete it anyways. But let's look at A service actually. In A service, we see here that it created lots of things. It basically inlined the entire logic into this mock. And of course, now we need to adopt this test. And actually, we don't want to adopt the test. And we only have to adopt the test because we used the mock here and overrode that method that eventually got inlined. So we tightly coupled the implementation to the test, and we actually don't want that. If you have lots of collaborators that are each collaborator is mocked and the collaborator of the collaborator is mocked again, then you have a completely unmaintainable code, and we have seen this in actual systems already. So is there a better way? And I think there is. So let's just ignore these ugly tests and see what happened in a better test. So in this test here, we have A service, better test, and we inject B service here. So let's briefly revert the changes we have made. So everything is as before. So we run this test. And now let's say we inline again. And we do exactly the same as before. Create this call counter field here. So this is green again. And now let's see how a service better test changed. So it changed not at all. So we don't need to adopt it. And this is exactly the point. We should basically try to only create test doubles for code that is not our own, which we have no control over, which is hard to instantiate, which is accessing external networks and systems, which is basically what awkward dependencies are. And if we do that and only only invoke the public interface of the service and directly use the actual service instead of a mock, we don't need to adopt anything here. And this is the best case. There's still a place where we might need an adoption, especially here, if we at some point want to remove the B service. So as soon as I want to get rid of this, because it's not used anymore, of course, then I also need to adopt the interface, because I see here I cannot say typically save deleted, so it's not that simple. But what I could be doing or could do here is I wrap this into a create method. So I hide away what the issue is actually, or what the collaborators are, and then I move this to a service. And now I can basically freely remove that. So if I remove it here, then I can also get rid of this one here. And still, my test did not need to be adopted. So to conclude, don't write mocks for every collaborator you have. Try to test your public interface as much as possible and try to avoid testing internal collaborator methods that might get inlined afterwards. And if you do that, your tests become much less brittle. And only try to write test doubles for any collaborator that is slow, that is non-deterministic, or that is really hard to instantiate. And again, sometimes you want to write tests for your internal classes. This could be if you have lots of very complicated logic. And in that case, of course, you create a test file for it. It's just a general rule of thumb that your tests and your code are much less brittle if you try to write your test against the publicly available interface. So the interface that is basically, once you release it, you're not in control anymore of who is going to call it. And everything that is in your control, you should try to use those classes, because then you are free to inline and change however you like. And that way you are much more likely to create a code base that has a solid test suite, which will not break if you change something inside. That's it.